So I got the business stuff. So I started a tech company. Now I'm a non-technical founder. I do not code, but I came up with this it's still a really good idea. A good idea for a startup, and all the lessons got learned really quickly. One, there is no team of one. You cannot do it by yourself, no matter how many degrees you have, no matter how successful you are, no matter how many people you know. Two, it turned me on to the need for money, right? So, everybody tells entrepreneurs and startups to be super scrappy and bootstrap it. That went away really quickly when I needed to build a whole tech platform and integrate with other platforms, right? Like I clearly didn't have that kind of capital and I needed to raise, which takes me back to the first point, which was everybody I went to talk to for this great idea. They agreed it was a great idea, but then they said, who's your team? And they knew that I wasn't a technical founder. They knew that, I'm not a marketing, person. So they were looking for a team. And at first I really started to think, oh, they don't know what I'm talking about. I can do this. I'm a superwoman. And after, repeated failure after another, finally it was like, this isn't working. And I think that really showed me a couple of things. One, it is okay to have a team. Two, you need to be able to lean on other people, and you need to be able to take feedback and process it well.
Mm-hmm. Love those. Great info. How long did you work at the idea before you were like, okay, this isn't working, scratch?
Probably just under a year. So and I'm sure you're talking about building a platform as well. You know that really quickly you've got to get something that people can touch and feel and work with. So I did the intellectual property work. I filed the patents. They're like, oh, okay, go through the process. I think technically they're still in process, but once I really started getting in and, I'll call it tinkering and doing all these other things, right at that year mark, it's like, you've gotten nowhere. And that's one of those things that in business school, they talk to you about sunk cost. You can't say, oh, I can't quit because, I've already put in this much time, this much money, this much whatever. You've got to really be able to almost have a reality check with yourself. And I had that right at about a year in, and I said, okay, it's time to regroup because this isn't working. I talked to a couple of my mentors. I always have really good mentors. And they were like, okay, everybody fails. This, I think for me, it felt like kind of the first time something I really wanted fell through. But then after that, I started another company and moved on.
Nice. Love that. And I will summarize some of the takeaways that I'm getting from this stuff at the end, but please drop anything as you're hearing things that you're like, I've experienced this as well, or I have questions about that, because we will get to all of those things. Sunk cost fallacy, definitely something you guys should look into if you're starting a business. Love that you touched on that, Dr. Shanté. What made you then decide, okay, I'm going to go and get into venture capital?
So my now third company was called RW Capital Partners. One of the things that I was really good at, because I did come out of a bit of an investment bank, and I was able to do in and out licensing and do a few M&A deals, I knew how to conduct due diligence. And I started getting people saying, hey, can you take a look at this? This is a good deal, da, 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 da. And then I said, wait, if I can do the diligence for them, then I can do it for myself. And then I really started thinking about my own pain point from my previous venture. Someone's got to help people raise money. Somebody's got to take that risk with you. Somebody has to believe in you. And after that, I really took that first leap in. I love to tell the story that my actual first investment was into a small business, not into the VC space. And it was a hair salon. It was something I knew, but I got capital into a woman-owned business, got her that capital so she could create a new revenue stream. And then from there, I started taking baby steps closer to angel investing. And then right at the tail end, when I was really thinking about what's my next step with the firm, I met up with another partner and we decided to go all in and do VC. And we both took our angel investing and small business investment track records and we applied them to venture capital.
Amazing story. Love that. And congratulations on all of your success so far. Your tagline is be well, do well. What does that mean to you, to us?
So most people know, I think now, like the doctor part of my name. I used to be an experimental therapeutics neuro-oncologist. So a lot of words to say. I stopped brain tumors from spreading through the brain, and you're not going to do very well if you have a tumor spreading through your brain, right? And my partner, Dr. Carl Smart, is a critical care pulmonologist. You're not going to do well if you can't breathe. What we really started to see is there are so many factors that apply to the quality of life that we have, whether it's directly our health, our finances, the environment, transportation, you know, a safe environment, not being in a violent environment. If, in order for us to do well, to do the things that we want to do well, to have a healthful life, we have to be well. And there's so many factors that plug into your health. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, I didn't have to go to the doctor, so I'm well. And that's actually not the definition of being healthy. It's really saying, you know, the absence of sickness is not the presence of health. Or being well. And so for me, it was, how do we pull on all of these factors? We all should be thinking, are all the areas of my life operating well, or at least enough of them operating well in order for me to do and operate in the space and manner that I really want to. So for me, be well, do well is so much more than just, you know, am I not sick? Now I can go do my job. It's really, let's look at the whole environment. Let's think about my mental health. Let's think about what I'm eating. Let's think about the air I'm breathing. You know, am I happy? A lot of people discount the happiness factor in whether or not their startup or their life is going well. You know, happiness isn't a destination. It's a state of being. And for me, it's really saying, are we present? Are we doing well or being well? And if we are, you can excel at anything you choose to do.
Agree. So much of that is just full of the values that I'm also in alignment with. I want to just ask a little bit deeper here. So as a founder, right, and I see this a lot with my founder friends too, we're in it. We're in that hustle culture. And sometimes it feels like every choice we make is like mission critical, or someone on our team misses a deadline or messes up in an email. And it's like, you know, we end up getting really upset about these, if you zoom out, you know, smaller things, but in the moment, it doesn't really feel like it because everything is so important, quote unquote. So how do you balance that and prioritize, like finding value in your work, but zooming out and understanding, like for the most of us, you know, we're building SaaSes, or like, we're not at the operating table or like going to war. There's not like lives at stake, like you mentioned brain tumors and not breathing, right? But we still want to have that passion, like as if it's life changing. So how do we balance that?
We actually have a saying, you know, having a clinical background, no one's going to die if that email didn't get sent today. I promise. No one's going to die if you don't, you know, reply to an email. If it's an actual emergency, even if you called your doctor's office right now, guess what they will say? If this is an actual emergency, call 911. Right. And in my head, that always is playing. Is this an actual emergency? The emotional energy we spend on, you know, especially for founders, precious. You need all of your faculties, all of your emotional energies really to pour into your business. So for me, one of the things that I love to tell founders is, I promise no one's going to die today. I know it feels like it, and it feels like it for me. I had something pop up yesterday and I was at a level 10,000, right? But I have to take the step back and say, okay, how critical is this? You know, most mistakes, most misses, most slip ups, whatever, are very recoverable. And you have to be able to think through, like, what's the recovery here? If I just missed the deadline by 2 minutes, it's fine. You know, it is what it is. You know, plan your time a little better. You know, if you're depending on somebody and then they didn't do their part, you know, have that conversation with them. But I've learned the hard lessons of being angry at every single thing. If you react to everything, you almost are reacting to nothing. It means your hair is on fire all the time. So I take the breath. No one's going to die. How do I think through this? And thinking through it as a founder is important. Whether that's something you can control or not is a different story. But everybody, I hope, knows the serenity prayer. Lord, help me, you know, change the things I can and live with the things I can't, right? The things you can't change are out of your control, and just, you really have to move on. And I think that's the hardest lesson of all, to relearn every single day as a founder.
Totally agree. And as a human in general too, I think we all go through that. So we're not perfect. And I appreciate you just having understanding for that. As an investor, it feels good to know that there's investors out there that are aware and can give us grace from time to time when we make those mistakes. So I was looking through, you choose to invest in specific verticals like most investors. Why do you choose to invest in the specific verticals that you do? And if you could just give high level for those that are watching and maybe thinking like Dr. Shanté, she might be an investor that I could approach, which verticals are you looking at right now?
So mainly for Black Pearl Global, I am investing in healthcare. That's everything except for pharmaceuticals. But I also take a more broad social determinants of health kind of approach, meaning, if it's green tech, there may be some environmental plugins that reduce or improve your healthcare outcomes. We have invested a little bit into fintech. If there's a direct, we are enabling people to pay for health. Healthcare is at the center of what I do on the Black Pearl Global side. But as a private investor, I'm looking for really good opportunities. And so usually I tell someone it never hurts me to have a conversation. A lot of people are saying, hey, do you know somebody that does? And I've got from collecting space junk to, healthcare to, something, SaaS-based platform that does X. So it never hurts me to have the conversation. I like to remind founders, investors don't make money if they don't have anything to invest in. So I don't ever consider it a waste of time. Now, I always encourage people, yes, I'm in healthcare, social determinants of health, and then maybe there's a smaller pie that I may be really interested in. And a lot of it is women focused. But at the end of the day, it never hurts me as a human to make a connection with somebody who's building something. Because guess what? I may get a call from a colleague. I might just decide, you know what? I want to, plug this person in here. And so those verticals are important to me because of my background, because of my own watching people in my family not be able to navigate the healthcare system or, get the care that they needed at the time they got it, or at the time they really needed that would have made the difference. But outside of that, for me, and not every investor is the same. Some investors only want to hear about the technology vertical that they invest in. I encourage founders to know do their homework, know what an investor does, what they're interested in, and then say, Dr. Shanté, I know this isn't healthcare, but I'd love to just talk to you about X, Y, and Z. That doesn't work. I will give you the 15 or 20 minutes to really just talk through.
Amazing. And I can attest that this is true. I reached out and I heard back. So for those that are just joining, we are chatting. This is an investor. Ask me anything. So make sure you're putting your questions into the chat. We will get to them. We have Dr. Shanté Williams, the CEO of Black Pearl Global Investments with us, $25 million venture capital fund. We're live on Entra, the fastest growing professional network. And we're jumping through all of my questions and we'll get to all of yours too. So make sure you're chiming into the chat via the conversation there. So you mentioned that with Black Pearl Global, you are focused primarily on healthcare. What defines like a transformative healthcare company to you?
So we take three things into consideration. Does it improve the outcomes? Practitioners like to see good outcomes. I don't want to see something that's purely for fun. Does it have measurable outcomes? Having a large following on the internet is not an outcome from a healthcare perspective, right? Does it reduce the cost? If you have not tangled with the healthcare system, congratulations. It is expensive, and it's expensive whether you have insurance or not. And does it increase access? One of the things that still bothers me as someone in this space is not everybody has the same access to very, very, very basic healthcare. And that's everything from preventative care all the way up to something that may be life critical, like a mammogram. So those are the three things that for me, it's going to be transformative. If it does one of the three, great. If it does two of the three, awesome. If it hits all three of those, I'm in, because that's going to really show up.
Love that. You're still here, right? I didn't lose you?
No, I'm here.
Okay. So that covers a little bit of like the idea, the concept, the product. What about the founder? Because they could have an amazing idea, but then what do you look for in that founder or that founding team?
So one experience, of course, I'd like to know that you know what you're talking about. Healthcare is very interesting. Most of the investors that invest in healthcare have no healthcare background. So I always go, how do you know if it's good or not? But conversely, some people that are developing or creating for the healthcare space also have never intersected with the healthcare system other than being a patient. So I'm looking immediately for, is there the experience here? It may not be the founder. It may just be, we found a medical doctor that we are using and leveraging to get that expert feedback and really understand how the systems work. The other thing, and I know everybody's probably heard coachability 7 million times. You'll be surprised how important there's a balance of stubbornness and coachability. Founders have to be sure. And they have to, that gut feeling that I got something here and I'm going to follow my gut, but also I can hear feedback, understand where it's coming from, and take the parts that are going to be relevant to push me forward. That's what I'm looking for. We have a running joke inside of our firm. We have a lot of running jokes. But we say, life's too short to invest with people or invest in people you don't like. I know that sounds very petty, but at the end of the day, this is a fun fact I like to bring out is the average marriage around the world is about 7 years. The average investor relationship is more than 10 years. That means you're more likely to be with me than you are your spouse, which means I have to actually like you. I have to trust you. We have to work well together. We have to communicate well. It is a marriage, and it's actually a harder marriage to dissolve than it is your actual marriage. So what I'm looking for in a founder is, yes, they are certain, they are competent, they are, they're fast charging, but know when to pull back and recharge, because I don't want anybody to burn out. Also, they can listen. If I'm saying, hey, we've got this great opportunity that will allow you to go X, Y, and Z, and you go, I don't want to be in Kansas City tomorrow. Okay, so you're going to miss out on an opportunity, which means you're playing with my money. I don't like that. So that's what I'm looking for. And those are very nebulous things. But think about if you're a founder, people say, well, everybody's coachable. That's not really true. If you can't listen without getting offended, if you can't listen without feeling like, oh, they're just too stupid to understand, you're not as coachable as you think. And so I encourage everybody to just think, when I'm getting feedback, am I listening, or am I listening to respond? Am I processing and saying, they may have a point there. I'm not saying change your whole startup to go with whatever somebody said, but are there some gems in there? And if you are doing that, you're very coachable, and you're really ready to work with an investor. The other piece is, am I polished and honest? I'm sorry, I'm going to curse. I have a bullshit detector that is better than most. And for me, I'm always like, okay, if it don't make sense, there's a lie somewhere. So, if I ask you what your revenue is and you give me a 500-word long answer, okay, you're not being honest. If you've sold nothing, just say nothing, but we're on track for it, that's fine. But be honest. And then those emails that you send to an investor, a lot of people actually do read them. Are there typos in it? I make a lot of typos. I'm a crappy speller, which is why I have someone else read my important emails, right? Make sure that you're doing those little things. Be nice to my assistant. If you're crappy to my assistant, I don't want to talk to you, because that tells me how you treat other people. So be polished and be honest. And that tells me, if we get into an investing relationship, you're going to tell me when it's not working. You're going to tell me when I made a mistake. You're going to tell me, I have this opportunity. I'm not sure what to do with it. You're going to be open and honest, and you're not going to cut corners.
Beautifully said. I love all of that. Continuing to talk a little bit about fundraising and investment right now for founders, we're hearing a lot of it's going to be a really hard time. What is the optimal time to fundraise for a founder?
Every day, all day.
Okay.
And I say that jokingly, but I like cliches and sayings that you can already tell. It's hard out here for a pimp. It's real hard. Yes. Interest rates are going up, which means people are not taking the same risks. Crypto, we had a lot of crypto millionaires, billionaires, or whatever they were calling themselves, that were spending money very freely. Guess what? that's dried up. So the optimal time is really, you never stop fundraising. This is why your relationships and your connections are so important, whether you're fundraising or not. The optimal time of, per any funder or founder or investor is before you need the money. If you are trying to fundraise for, let's call it $250,000 and you need it by the end of the month, you're not going to get it. I promise. Because that means you're already in the pot. Now, good planning, good financial planning, good, business planning says, I know in 6 months we have this big thing that I really need to be keep my eye on, and I need the capital for it. So if it's 6 months out from where you are today, you should have probably started 6 months before that. Unfortunately, for most women and founders of color, it takes you twice as long to fundraise for the same amount. On average, that could be anywhere from 6 to 18 months. And if you wrap in diligence is, I don't care who tells you that they can get it done in 22 days or 2 weeks, or they're lying to you. Unless they already know you and you've already worked together, it's not going to happen in that time frame. So you're looking at least 30 days. So start fundraising before you need the money. Start building those relationships before you need the money. If you need the money now, then that's where you're going to have to say, who are the right people to talk to immediately? You may not be able to raise venture capital, for example, in 30 days. You may need to go to a bank, and even a bank, 30 days might be, we're cutting it real close. You may be in the private sector. You may be looking at angel investors. Angel investors, I don't think get enough glory because they can move the fastest. They don't have LPs to answer to. It's usually their own money. They can cobble together or create their own syndicate group. So angel investors may be your best choice, but you're always fundraising. Don't think you're not. Even if you don't need money, quote, today, you're going to need money in the future. So you're always fundraising. Always start well before you need the money.
Great tips. How do you, once you say you're going to start, how do you make sure that it's a smooth fundraising process?
Oh, this is where I hope everybody has heard the term data room. Do you have a data room? What's in your data room? Of course, you've got your pitch deck. Everybody focuses on the pitch deck. That is like step 0, right? Financials. This is where people tend to fall off really quickly. Do you have the right financials? Have they been well put together? If you are not an accountant or somebody that's really good at numbers, make sure you get a bookkeeper, know what you're doing. Do you have a forecast? That goes into your data room. Every investor wants to know, how am I going to make my money back? So I want to see your revenue plan. I want to see your growth plan. I want to see all of these things tucked in. Also, a lot of people bootstrapping, skip over documentation. What do I mean by that? Are you legally formed? If you have partners, do you guys have an agreement that is, solid and legal? It's more than just a handshake. If you've got employees, have HR policies? All of that stuff is populating your data room. I would not start fundraising before you have your data room ready. If you don't have financials ready, you're not ready to fundraise. For the simple fact that the one thing that I flipped through in a business plan, you could give me 800 pages. You know what I'm going to do? Flip to the financials very quickly. Okay, I got the gist. I know what you do. It takes a sentence to read that. Where are the numbers? If you don't have the numbers, you don't want to get in front of an investor and go, okay, we're pulling them together and it's going to be a couple of weeks. Guess what? You probably just lost that investor because you weren't ready to talk. So that's what you need to be doing. Focus on your data room. Make sure it's all together, easy to navigate. I'm not telling you have to spend a ton of money on a platform. I've been in a data room that's a Google Drive that's well set up, that's, got proper passwords, but it's easy to navigate. I know what's where. It's very organized and I can easily navigate through it. That's the piece that's what sticks you in due diligence. That's what gets under investor skin very quickly if you're not really ready. Inevitably, there'll be something an investor asks you for that you don't have. And that's fine. But if you've got those basic building blocks, your financials, making sure you have all your legal docs. A lot of people don't know, if you are structured as an LLC, guess what you can't actually do? You have no shares to give away. So You can't be fundraising as an LLC. So those tiny little things mean, okay, I might be interested, but guess what? I'm going to have to ask you to reincorporate so that you can issue out or divvy out equity or shares. That's going to slow you down. So be ready before you start.
Gosh, so much. And we could get into the nitty gritty. I have so many questions, being that I've never fundraised before, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I see a ton of questions coming in. You said something about how much harder it is for women to fundraise. And we're coming off of Black History Month. And now, in a couple days, Women's History Month is going to be over. How are you feeling coming off of these 2 months? And the last few years where so many things have happened for women, for Black people of color in general. Do you feel like we did a good job these last 2 months? And what other work do we have to do? What are you noticing out there?
I hate to be a pessimist. We've moved nowhere. If you look at the straight numbers, we had when I say a tiny bump, we had the percentage of VC dollars go up to 2.5%, maybe close to 3%, for a year or two. And guess where it is now? Back down where it was prior to 2020 or any of this racial equity work, which tells me those were emotional responses. Those emotional responses aren't sustainable for founders. I find a lot of the programs that are offered out to people of color or women are more marketing and vanity plays. $10,000 is great if you're literally just starting out, right? That's going to get you your basic things together. $10,000 is almost no money if you got an employee. I always use myself as an example. Payroll for us is $80,000 every 2 weeks, which means if you give me a $10,000 grant because it's Women's History Month, I'm going to go, what are we going to do, throw a pizza party? Like $10K. Not that we don't want an extra $10K, but we've got to really start to think, are the things we're doing for any of these populations that have been historically underserved moving the needle? Yeah. I am seeing more people really start to think about the money they take and the investors they take and say, I need money so I can keep going further, faster. I don't want to have to say, great, I got $50,000 in, I can do a little bit. Now I got to go back and raise $50,000 more. No, we're seeing a lot of investors, not a lot. We're seeing some investors come in and really say, what's going to be transformative to this company? I'm not looking for volume. I'm not looking for how many startups I can bring into my system. I'm looking for who I can really have contact with and help them get on the right path.
Love that. And I love how real you are. I want to get into some other real questions, and I hope that are okay. So, as a woman of color, have there been instances of discrimination that you can recall experiencing throughout your career?
Absolutely. It's amazing that I'm an investor now. I really just wanted a job in a VC. I couldn't get one. Literally. I interviewed dozens of times. Now, I got the feedback, well, you didn't go to an Ivy League. You didn't do X, Y, or Z. But then all of a sudden, it was like, you know what? Maybe I should do this myself. I got told I have several degrees under my belt before I even went out. Maybe you should consider getting another degree. Why would I do that? That's just another excuse. Everybody, at some point, degrees don't really matter. You're just collecting them like, infinity stones. You have to have the experience, and someone has to say, I'm putting you in there. So, I'm putting you in this position and we'll see how you do. So for me, it really came down to people looking at my physical embodiment and thinking, you don't look like a VC. You don't look like an investor. That's happened to me plenty of times. I now run a contact lens manufacturer, and most of my employees are actually Caucasian or Asian. And when we're in meetings, guess who they talk to first? My wonderful president. Her name is Michelle. She's a white woman. They assume she's the boss, and she has to go, she's my boss. If there's a man standing next to us, we outrank both of them in most conversations. And the conversation gets addressed to them. And then he's got to go, that's my boss and that's her boss, right? And so those are those small things that maybe, it's an honest mistake. No, it's people relying on the stereotypes. Oh, I assume the owner is a man. I assume the owner is not a person of color. I assume the person that's really going to be the decision maker is someone else.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing those things. And Shante, I see you've raised your hand. We are absolutely going to bring people up for Q&A. How important is it to you, Dr. Shanté, that when you're out and about, you're doing your thing, are you thinking about that you're a role model to other women and people of color?
It sounds terrible. I really am not. My mother's a pastor. I am a Christian by religious affiliation. And the one thing I tell people, you should be living your life in a way that people want to feel inspired, be empowered by, however. So I'm not thinking, I'm going to say this for all women. I'm thinking, I'm going to be honest and truthful, and I hope it resonates with other people. And so far, that's worked out. I think what's been harder for me to really swallow, I've had some people say, "Oh my God, you're one of my role models," and I'm like, "What?" It's kind of hard to believe that, as at this big age, someone is looking at the path I blazed, but I'm not thinking about it every day. I'm not a person who really focuses on legacy. I think there's a church hymn that says, "May the work I've done speak for me." And the work I've done and the work I continue to do, I hope it speaks for me. And so I'm incredibly flattered all the time. I do take it seriously. I would never want to misrepresent. And the one thing I do know is entire swaths of people get judged by an interaction with one. So as a Black woman, if I'm acting crazy, or, if I curse everybody out, which I'm very capable of doing, if I do that, I may be ruining it for somebody else. Somebody else might go, "Ooh, well, I had that one conversation." It's one conversation. It shouldn't, castigate a whole population of people, but it will. So I do take the rooms that I'm in and the people that I represent, whether I'm intentionally representing them or not, very seriously, because I know something I do, say, or don't say could affect other people.
Mm-hmm. 100% true. And I was asked some of these questions at a panel that I spoke on, and I felt them. And so that's why I was like, I'm going to ask Dr. Shanté these questions as well. Would you advise founders of color like myself to use discernment when it comes to choosing investors? And if yes, what qualities are important?
Yes, and yes. Yes, yes, and yes, and yes. Again, 10-year marriage, it's got to go both ways. It's not just, usually there's this power dynamic in an investor and a founder. It actually is more equal. The two of you are on equal footing. The founder should have as much say so in a conversation because they're doing it as the investor. The one thing that you can always ask for are maybe two things you can ask for from an investor. Do I feel comfortable? And that's a personal thing. Dang, did I feel comfortable asking that person a question, having this conversation, sharing, my baby with them? Did I feel comfortable? Was it an easy conversation, or did I feel like, oh, okay, not that you won't be nervous, but literally, I feel stupid for saying this, or I don't want to, those little internal cues can tell you what that, relationship could shape up to be. Mm-hmm. So I say do a gut check. If you're not comfortable in the early conversations, you really aren't going to be comfortable when we start talking about money and numbers and what did you spend the money on. So think about that really early on. 2, I encourage everybody to ask investors, who have you invested in? What's your relationship been like? If they aren't willing to tell you, that's a red flag. And before you even get into that meeting and ask that question, go look it up. If you can't find a track record of them anywhere, that says something. Mm-hmm. If you are, looking around and you only see nasty grams, some really ooh, I don't know. Also take that into advisement. Yes, every situation is different and there are 2 sides to a story. But if you see 7 founders say, I took some money and now they try to take my company, they might be people trying to take your company, right? So those are little things. Look at the track record. Look at what, other founders are saying. If they say, oh, I invested in Miriam, I'm going to call Miriam. Hey, Miriam, what was your experience? And usually founder to founder conversations are the best. You can also look at their investor network and say, hey, I was thinking about working with Dr. Shanté. I'd love to know, how you guys have worked together, because that will also tell you if they're acting crazy with their peers, you might not stand a chance there. So that first gut feeling, is this a relationship I want? It's almost like dating, right? In that early moments of a first date, whether you're like, ooh, no, this something's wrong here. Listen to it. You have to choose your investor just like your investor has to choose you. Mm-hmm.
Very great. I loved all of that. Just a few more questions, just 2 more, and then we'll open it up to the floor. We're coming up on May. You've written about your mental health very openly on social media. What are some things that you can share with us on that?
One, there is no award for being the hardest working Black woman or hardest working Latina woman, the hardest working Black man, white man, whomever. There is no award for being the hardest working founder. Take a day off. Like if you, and I took that to heart. Like I was every day, all day. Like if I'm not working 18, 19 hours, I'm doing it wrong. If I'm not up at 5 a.m. and I hate mornings, I'm not doing it right. At the end of the day, if you're building a company that cannot function without you for one day, you're doing it wrong. Everybody deserves a break, and you don't deserve a break because you did enough work. You deserve the break because you're human. You deserve the break because your brain and your body needs a rest. So that's the one mental health thing that, you know, and I go through cycles of overworking. Overworking, it does not mean you're doing more. So that's probably the one that I have hit burnout before, to a point where it's just like my entire body shut down. So mentally, I put so much pressure on myself to perform that it wasn't helpful for anybody. So take a break, take a nap. I love naps. If you're not sleeping, I don't believe in this no sleep culture. I get 8 hours of sleep. So at the end of the day, my mental health is more important than any company I've invested in, any company that I want to invest in, any company that I currently own. If I'm not mentally sound, I'm not going to be okay. And keep your mind happy. I'll say it that way. And I mentioned before, happiness is not a destination. You're not going to be more happy if you raise $1 million or if you make $1 million if you're not happy with what you're doing today. If you pull in more money, you're going to have to run faster. You have to realize that, do I enjoy what I'm doing now when it's small? Okay. At the next step, do I enjoy it at this stage? There might actually be a stage where you're like, I don't like this no more. That's okay. The other mental health thing that I'll say is knowing when to quit is hard. It's very hard. And you could be a smashing success in making hundreds of millions of dollars and say, I don't want to do this anymore. Guess what? You get to say no. You get to say, I'm done. I'm tired. I quit. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm moving to something else. And if that's the case, then you should absolutely just do it. And again, there's no award. I haven't gotten it yet. And if I haven't gotten it, I don't know that anybody else is going to get one either. But just keep that in mind.
Yes. Okay. Any book recommendations, newsletters, influencers, or podcasts that we should have on our radar?
I don't know if I have any off the top of my head right now. I have not done the greatest of jobs of reading. I will tell you the last book I read is The Light We Carry, Michelle Obama's book. And, you know, ultimately that book doesn't talk about startups or anything. It really talks about, you know, finding your way and, you know, being on purpose and those and that kind of stuff, like really managing your own emotions. That's the last book I read. And it helped me to think about, you know, how I'm taking care of me, how I view me, how I interact with other people and about me. I'm reading I read every couple of years, the 48 Laws of Power. That's one of those, like, either you love it or you hate it kind of books. And it took me probably 1.5 years the first time around to read it, because it's like, oh, that's too much. It's too deep, whatever. So I would say for me, I always tell founders, read something that has nothing to do with your field though. Like you can't only be focused in and narrowed in that way. Read something fun. Read, I don't know, romance novels or whatever. And then this is just my own, I'll call it old millennial self. Be careful who you're getting startup advice from on the internet. I love social media, but every now and then I'll come across an investor or an entrepreneur and I'm like, who does that? They clearly have never, no, that's not true. So when you're listening to some of these podcasts, look them up. What have they done? I was sitting in a talk and they were saying how to build a multi-million-dollar business. And I just, you know, kind of cynical. Have you built a multi-million-dollar business? No, but I've encouraged many people to do so. What? What? So ask that question. You know, if I'm listening to a podcast and they're talking about something, is it coming from personal experience or, you know, something they've really been able to do? If the answer is no, then be skeptical.
Yes. And I love that you didn't plug any of your books, which you should or people should be aware that Dr. Shanté is also a published author. You can find her books online, Amazon, and her latest one's coming out as well. I'll drop the link. Let's dive into some of the questions here. If you want to raise your hand and come up and ask your question, you can. And I want to be respectful. So do we have a stop at 1 p.m.?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. So let's go into, let's see. Do you invest in e-commerce from Cromwell?
You said in e-commerce and what?
Invest in e-commerce.
It depends. There's a lot going on in e-commerce. The short is I haven't yet. So there's not been a platform that's gotten me to the point where I want to write a check. That's not to say I wouldn't, but it's an area that I don't have a tremendous amount of expertise in other than being a user and then trying to use it in my own business.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for your questions, Cromwell. Great to see you, Sharpay. Some other VCs that have popped in. Let's see, just scrolling through. Isaiah wants to know, should I invest in books rather than stocks, EFTs, NFTs, etc.? I don't know much about those, just the basics.
Well, I don't give out investment advice in that way. However, if the last part of your statement was, for me, the most critical. I don't invest in things I don't know or I don't understand. If I can't understand it, I'm not putting my money in it. And that's really just, most investors are that way. If you're really interested in it, you'll learn about it. If you're not interested in it, don't put your money in it. I'm not a big investor in the stock market other than some very pedestrian things. I don't consider myself one of those people that's going to sit and, do the retail and the retail trading thing. But I will say, if you don't understand it, don't put your money in it.
Mm-hmm. Great advice, but not investment advice. Brian has a great question. Where are some good places to connect with investors? What do investors want to hear coming from you about your business? In the case of one selling products and goods, in my case, a pre-workout supplement.
Best places to meet investors, probably startup competitions or pitch competitions or, in the ecosystem. Some investors don't want to be known as investors, which is a very odd dichotomy. I always find if you're at a pitch competition, if you're at an event today, I'm going to give a keynote for a women's business center here. I'm one of probably 15. The easiest way and the best way to intersect with investors is be where their products are. Meaning, if my products are startups, go to an event. Even if you're not pitching, go to an event. Even if you're not on the agenda, that's where you're going to meet people that are going to be interested. A lot of people go to conferences and that kind of a thing. I've found that those aren't really the best place because investors tend to get swamped there. And so they sometimes stay away unless they're speaking. The other place, I know this sounds weird, LinkedIn is actually a fantastic place to, just kind of go, who's an investor in X? And those people, if they're promoting it, if they're talking about it, they may be incredibly open networkers and, point you in the right direction. The other thing you can look for is angel groups in your area. Angel groups are, masses of individual investors. We have several here in North Carolina, and, inevitably, if you just show up to one of their meetings, there's 50 to 100 investors in that room interested. So angel groups are ripe for founders to just start networking and getting their business out there. You cannot be afraid. One, don't come in and saying, hey, I'd really like you to invest in my company for $100,000. But really you start thinking about, okay, am I in the right place? I heard sports supplements is where you are. That means that, anybody really could be an investor for you in the sense that if you're in a bodybuilding competition, guess what? Those are both customers and potential investors. Always think your customers could be your investor. You're not exactly sure who might have the capital that you need to take you to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Love it. If you have any questions, I kind of scrolled through. I feel like I got to the bulk of them as we covered some of them during. I'll summarize really quick some takeaways that Dr. Shanté shared with us. First, the sunk cost fallacy, make sure you look into that and fail through things as they come across your founder journey. Remember and keep in mind, no one is going to die today. Don't react to everything. Conserve your energy and move on. She invests in everything in healthcare except pharmaceuticals. As a private investor, she's more open. She invests in really good opportunities, and she's always happy to have conversations. So make sure you connect with her. Life is too short to invest in people that you do not like. So don't get into relationships with people investors that you don't actually like. Be coachable, polished, and honest. Those are some things that you should be cultivating in yourself. Be honest and truthful when you are out there. Don't try to please everybody and just hope that by being honest and truthful, it works out. But always do a gut check when you're talking to investors, and remember that there's no award for being the hardest working founder. So with that, I'm going to give us back a few minutes so that we can take a beat in between our calls, right? But any last words, Dr. Shanté?
No, this is going to be a very interesting year from an economic standpoint, from a fundraising standpoint. That conserve your energy. Have a plan, and then have another plan, and then have another plan. No one dies from failure. No one's going to permanently brand you if you do fail. And as you continue to work through, my mom has this saying. She says, and I'll share it with you guys. She says two things. You got to work the plan for the plan to work. Well, that means you got to have a plan, right? So working your plan is necessary. You got to execute. The other thing is, if you can make it just one more day, one more night, the next day could really change your life, which means keep pushing. Even if it's hard, even if you get 10,000 no's yesterday, you only need one yes. So, continuing to remember, no is a part of the conversation, and it's only on its way to a yes.
Thank you so much for those powerful closing words. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And I hope you guys go out and do some good work, take some time for yourself, and like Michael, our founder here at Entre always says, make some money.
Yes. Bye-bye.